Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're going to be looking at Sharp Swords and Sinister Spells, which is a rules-light sword and sorcery role-playing game with an old-school spirit. We're also going to be taking a look at the Addendum that was released for it that adds a whole bunch of extra rules and material that you can add onto your game. Let's look at the actual rules first, though. So it's a paperback book. It has some really great colorful art, a lot of action on it. It's print on demand, but for print on demand book, it actually looks quite nice. As always, links will be in the comments below. Now, looking at the rules themselves, this book, it has a surprising amount of art for a game of this sort. Typically, these smaller scale self-published games are rather light on the art because it can be expensive. But the author, or the creator here, Diogo Nogueira, has put out a huge amount of artwork, hired a lot of artists to really go all out in terms of the presentation, which is something I really appreciate. My main criticism of the artwork, which we'll see as we go through this a little bit more, is that it is very varied, I suppose. There's a wide variety of styles, and I'm not sure if they really mesh and work together. That being said, a lot of the individual pieces are actually very nice. So the core mechanic of this game is that it is a roll under system, which is a type of play that I've seen more and more of recently coming out of the OSR. So games like the Black Hack, the White Hack, Symbaroum, for example, or Into the Odd. Lots of games like that where your stats are simply a target number and then you're rolling that number or less on a d20. So there was definitely a lot of influence from the Black Hack, I feel, on this book. And in the interest of full disclosure, I should point out that I am actually thanked in the credits of this book, or it's inspired by the works of Ben Milton, which was really nice to read, actually. I assume he's talking about Maze Rats there. So that was nice. But I don't see a whole lot of Maze Rats influence, apart from the fact that, especially in the Addendum, there's lots of random tables to give you material, which I really like. So the referee can adjust the difficulty by moving the target number up or down. Has positive and negative dice, which is kind of a white hack way of expressing advantage and disadvantage, but it's the same mechanic. You can also push the roll by taking extra risks on, and there is a luck roll, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it can make sense within the theme of the game. It also uses usage dice, which is very Black Hack. So it's nice to see this type of game coming out, where it's clear that the author has read a wide variety of other OSR books and is distilling down the mechanics and flavor that they want for their game. So you see a lot of this throughout the book. We have character creation, which goes with rolling your stats. And this is an issue I have with a lot of roll under systems. So this and the Black Hack and Into the Odd and so on, you're rolling 3d6 for all of your abilities. And because it's a roll under system, that can mean that right at the very beginning, you can end up with a situation where you roll your stats and you have 18s in more than one stat. It's not terribly likely, but it can happen. Same thing, you could have 3s. And starting out a new character with, an 18 is equivalent to a 90% success rate. Starting a character with a 90% success rate on things seems way too high for me. Similarly, having a 3, which would be a 15% success rate, also seems, I don't think that's great. You can have characters that are too powerful or too weak. I would recommend doing something like roll 2d6 plus 3, because that would give you a curve centered around 10. Obviously, you can do it to your own taste. And there's 3 main classes, which are called archetypes here. So we have your warrior, we have your specialist, and we have your magic user. And they're all fairly straightforward. They have a number of special abilities. You can also choose a vocation. So that's a very white hack move to make, where the idea is you simply choose a background in 5e terms, and that is your skill set. So whenever you do a task that is closely related to your vocation, then you gain advantage on it. So that way you don't have to mess around with the whole skill system. You can simply pick a vocation. Here's some complications that you can roll, and a number of weapons. Weapons are kept simple. There's small, medium, and large ones, which have escalating damage dice. Very easy to keep track of. We have armor. There's an interesting armor system here that I have not actually seen before. And the way that it works is you look at the damage die your opponent is rolling, and the armor modifies it down 1 dice step. So, or 2 dice steps, depending. So if you have light armor, that's just a -1 straight up damage reduction. But medium armor moves it down a dice step. So if they're rolling a d8, they're now rolling a d6. And heavy armor moves it down 2 dice steps. So that's kind of interesting in the sense that it doesn't give off strict damage reduction. So it allows for the swinginess to still be there. It allows for weak weapons to still be effective and not just be negated right out of the gate. But at the same time, I feel like it is an extra step, because you'd always have to keep track of what damage die do I roll for this weapon rather, and then what armor does my opponent have, and now I have to adjust that die and find that die out of my bag and roll that one. I feel like that's a number of steps. Maybe that's really smooth in play. I haven't actually tried it, but I think that's something to consider. And then we have a shield as well. So each, the 3 categories of shield, small, medium, and large, each one inflicts a number of negative dice to incoming attacks per round. So you can just give them disadvantage, basically. That's quite useful for a shield. It's also interesting that shields have mechanics that are distinct from the armor. So I actually kind of like that, because you're going to use them differently. You're going to use them in a more active way, because you're going to choose when to apply the disadvantage, whereas armor is just kind of static. It makes you feel like you're actually using your shield. Some adventuring gear. We have some encumbrance. In order to simplify, a character can carry a number of items equal to his physique score without penalty. And then beyond that, he's going to receive disadvantage. That's an excellent encumbrance system. More games should do that. Just use item slots to put things in. Yeah, I really like that. So we have abstracted movement and distance and measuring time. All of this is very similar to the Black Hack. We have attacking, where you simply roll underneath your stat to hit. But that's modified in some ways if you have an opponent an enemy creature that is more powerful than you, or has higher hit die, more hit dice, then your number is decreased by how much greater their hit dice is than yours. So bigger monsters are more difficult to attack. It is a little bit odd that it doesn't work the other way around, that weaker monsters or ones with less hit dice are not easier to attack, but that is compensated for to a certain degree by the fighter's ability, which allows them to have more attacks against weaker creatures. With criticals and fumbles. Damage is pretty straightforward. Saving throws. Dying. So when an opponent reaches 0 hit points, they're dead. Characters have a chance to survive. They can make a luck roll to try and survive when they're dying. So they're a bit hardier, though it seems in general that characters die a little bit more quickly in this than in a game like the Black Hack, where there's you roll on a table to see if you die, and that's only one of the possible options. We have spell casting. So to cast a spell, you have to make a willpower test with a difficulty equal to the power level of the spell. So the power level is determined by the magic user at the time that they're casting the spell. So that's a little bit interesting. All the spells have a variable amount of effect, and when you're casting it, you can choose that. It allows you to tailor your spells a lot more. The higher the power level is, the stronger it is, but it's more difficult to cast. So, and if you fail, then there are penalties that you can choose from. That's a little bit Apocalypse World, in the sense that you have options of things to pick. You're allowed to resist spells. Casting spells in armor is not a great idea. We have a list of spell catastrophes. This is similar to the stuff that I saw in Wonder and Wickedness, or stuff in Dungeon Crawl Classics has spell catastrophes and things like that. And we have a spell list. So this comes with, let's see, 50 spells, which is a good number of spells, especially for a fairly light system like this. And I like that the descriptions are very clean and straightforward and not difficult to read. They don't slog you through tons of details. A lot is left up to the game master to figure out for themselves. We have some magic items. And we have a Bestiary. Again, monsters, very straightforward. They're given a hit die, which tells you, it gives you their hit points, but also tells you roughly how powerful they are, because it's going to affect how hard they are to hit and how hard they are to dodge, along with a special ability. We have a reaction table, always important for old school games. We have a morale system and a random encounter system. So these things right here are the hallmarks of old school games. And it's hard to really have an old school game without them. So it's nice to see that they're there. Straightforward leveling up, which is done by adventures. Not my favorite way to do it. I would prefer something a little bit more concrete like gold or silver for XP, but this is a lot easier to keep track of, and I have done it that way before. We have an idea generator for your adventures, along with a bunch of locations. So we have D66 tables. So this looks a lot like Maze Rats. Well, that's kind of fun to see. Supporting characters, complications, and a character sheet here in the back. All right. So let's look at the addendum as well. So this was much bigger than I expected it to be. So the original book is, let's see, it's like 46 pages of text, whereas the addendum packs in 86. So it's almost double the size. And this is really fitting with the do-it-yourself ethos of the old school movement. It gives you a ton of tools and modular rules that you can simply plop in or yank out depending on the style that you want to play it in. This is really appealing to me, and I really like to see that stuff like this. Especially since as I was reading the book, I was thinking, I really like a lot of these rules, but I would probably do it this way. And then this book says, yeah, you can. Here's a way to do it. Expanding on your vocations, getting more detail in terms of the vocations that you can pick, how to get multi-archetype characters, what to be if you want to be a non-human character. You can simply add that to your vocations, right? So it'll expand your skill set, essentially. If you want to do 0 level characters, like a Dungeon Crawl Classics funnel, we have some rules for that. Rules for learning new abilities, along with a whole bunch of possible ones. And I really like the advice that it gives, that the best way to give special abilities is to make them quest for it. So it's not like you level up and boom, suddenly you have this new magical ability. Instead, place those things in the world so that they actually have to go and find them and earn them. The blood rule. So with the blood rule, it dramatically decreases the hit points of the character. So rather than actually rolling hit dice and your hit points escalating over time, so as you level up, you become very, very tough, blood keeps it very low. So basically, it gives you hit points equal to your physique score. And that's it. So all the characters are much more fragile, and that doesn't increase, forcing players to be much more careful throughout their adventure. Some sanity and madness, treasure points and resource dice. Where did my gold go? A quick equipment table. This is really useful, and it was kind of missing from the original book. It's simple packages that you can simply pick up. Getting an adventuring companion. Lots of random tables in this book. So we have travel hazards, lost tomes. Now, as I pointed out earlier, you can see that there is a lot of art, but the main thing is that a lot of the art is really different, right? So you have like this painting down here of a landscape. You have this very comic book looking art with a lot of thin lines and a lot of detail. And you have this rather old school journey to this temple over here. So all the art just looks very different. And my only criticism is that it doesn't have a sort of unified aesthetic. On the other hand, it can give you inspiration to run lots of different types of campaigns that have a lot of different feels. A whole bunch of new spells. Let's see how many new spells it gives you. So the original one had 50. This takes it up to 70. So 30 additional spells that you can add in. True sorcery for really turning up the power of the spells at a huge cost. Arcane Corruption. Again, very Dungeon Crawl Classics feel to this, in terms of adding more random tables and making magic feel ever more dangerous. Rare ingredients that you can add. How to add drugs and other preparations. And of course, a monster generator. It's hard to have a book of random tables without a way to generate your own monsters. Now, of course, this isn't as detailed as something like Maze Rats or what was that other book? The one with the tons of random tables. Oh, it'll come back to me in a second. The Metamorphica, that was it. But it does have more than enough for most people that you can whip up an interesting monster in just a couple of rolls. So you got a humanoid appearance, humanoid culture, is bestial form, different animals that you can use as a base. I like that strategy. Plant forms, undead forms, what it feeds upon, what its magical traits are, technology that it might have. Aberrations, what they're going to look like, what their characteristics are. We have stuff for elementals. We have a wide variety of 100 special abilities that you can simply plop onto a monster. So you whip up a monster, and then you can just say, roll under D100 and give it some powers, and then build it around that. Great idea. We have rules for fighting off mobs in order to speed up combat with lots of little mooks. Rumors and forgotten artifacts. Some random life events, 100 of them. It's a great way to flesh out NPCs or PCs. By answering these questions, you can get more insight into their backstory. Or you could even do it in a more story game style where you answer the questions for your neighbors. What has changed since we left? And an adventure title generator. So this is a really cool idea, right? So you can just roll on them. You roll on this little format over here. So say you roll a 7, the location in the quality location. Okay. So the location, the city in the crystal bridge, right? Or you could have something like the event. Let's do one that's a little bit different. The object of the quality character. So we have 100 of these. The object, let's say the mirror of the quality of the undead, and the character. Let's do one in the middle. So the mentalist, the mirror of the undead mentalist. So by rolling a couple times on that page, you can just get something, and then you can spin it out, right? So if you're running out of time right at the beginning of a session, then you can get a lot of seeds really quickly. It could also work for building side missions. So that's it for these books. I will put links down in the description below for where you can check them out yourself. I'm trying to explain what I really, the best way to sum up what I think of this. I really like the attitude of taking different mechanics that you enjoy and putting them together into a rule set that you like. I really like the fact that it's roll under, and I like that it has a lot of speed, a lot of modularity, and a lot of versatility. So speaking for myself, I'm probably going to take a lot of ideas from this book and adapt them for my own game. And I think you might too if you got it yourself. You can also run it as is. I think it's a great, fast little system for running old school role-playing games in the fantasy in a fantasy mold, and it solves a lot of problems I have with other roll-under systems. Although, like I said, it's modular enough that you can tweak it to your heart's content. So, very interesting book. I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did. I had skimmed the PDF earlier and thought, it looks interesting. But once I buckled down with the actual book, I read both of these books straight through back to back because every page had great material for it. And it was a lot more fleshed out than a lot of very light games. Rather than just giving you keywords that you flesh out yourself, it actually gives you mechanics for the monsters and the spells and so on. So if you're into that sort of thing, this is a really great choice. That's it for this review. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to see more videos like this, you can subscribe to the channel. You can also join me on Patreon if you want to support me making more videos like this. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you guys later.